welcome to Electricity Canada's Conservation Series. Electricity Canada is the national voice for sustainable electricity for our members and the customers they serve. My name is Dave McKendry, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's webinar. I would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which I'm broadcasting to you from today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. I would also like to recognize Canada as the land of the First Peoples, Inuit and Métis. I would like to pay homage to the Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, that continue to work, educate, and contribute to the strength of our country. I'd like to recognize that the land is shared through historic treaties, developed through contemporary treaties, and one that continues to be unceded territory. The conversation series features presentations from Electricity Canada's corporate partners, and the series highlights a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by the industry. Working with our partners, these webinars have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the electric utility space from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, check out the events section of our website at electricity.ca. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Our session is scheduled to run from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time today. We're pleased to let you know that we have over 200 registrants for today's webinar, and we are recording today's session, and it will be available in the next day or so on Electricity Canada's website and YouTube channel. And as a registrant, you will also be receiving copies of the proceedings in your email. Questions can be asked, and we would encourage you to ask them, but maybe hold them until the end of the webinar. But you can type them into the Q&A space function on Zoom here, and we will get to them, as I said, at the end of the webinar. And at this point, on today's session, we'd like to welcome Utilisys, who will be presenting AMI 2.0 in action: strategy, technology, and a real-world utility journey. As a first-generation smart meter regime reaches its end of life, utilities have a critical opportunity to move beyond simple replacement and unlock the expanded capabilities of AMI 2.0. With enhanced processing power, interoperability, and support for distributed energy resources and EVs and advanced grid monitoring, next-generation metering is foundational to modern grid operations. In this webinar, we'll explore industry trends, grid demands, and technology advancements shaping the transition, then hear firsthand from Festival Hydro about its AMI 2.0 journey, why the utility is moving now, how it approached procurement, its implementation roadmap, and the lessons learned along the way. After the session, we hope you will walk away with practical insights and peer-driven perspectives to help shape your own AMI 2.0 strategy. Our presenters today are John Forsyth, who's Director of Business Development and Sales with Utilisys, and Brian Hartung, who is Vice President Engineering and Operations at Festival Hydro. John and Brian, welcome to the conversation series. We'll now turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks, David. Greatly appreciated, and thanks to the Electricity Canada team for hosting this forum and giving us an opportunity to speak to a number of utilities. And it's a great example, that we're going to go through with Festival Hydro of the different stages of a project, moving from AMI 1 to 2. This idea of AMI 2, though, is a bit of a challenge. What is AMI 2? The term AMI 2 is not really a defined state. It's sort of it varies from vendor to vendor, but it's really the current state of the AMI capabilities with some of the advanced capabilities kind of rolled into that. Sometimes we do hear talk of an AMI 3 in the future, but that's still a bit of wishful thinking. But you do hear this term, AMI 1 is early generation, AMI 2 is kind of the current generation of AMI advanced capabilities. Again, I'm John Forsyth. I work with Utilisys. The Utilisys team is focused on helping utilities with their AMI projects across North America. We have a wealth of experience in this, and I'm very pleased that Brian was able to join us. Brian will provide that utility perspective on the AMI journey and key steps in their decision-making process leading up to their vendor selection and implementation of AMI 2. He's also going to share some valuable lessons, learned during the way. Um, Before I do that, though, I think we're just going to start. I'll give a bit of an overview of AMI, what's driving this, the transition to AMI 2. We'll go to the next slide. So, what's driving this shift to updating to AMI 2? Whether you have AMI 1 or something in between AMI 1 and AMI 2, it's typically the main driver is the equipment's aging and it's starting to have greater failure rates. Typical AMI life cycle for meters in the field is somewhere between 15 to 20 years. But as you approach the end of that life, again, you'll see the failure rate starting to increase as time goes on. There's also the networking infrastructure. That original AMI technology developed 15 or so years ago has somewhat limited functionality compared to today, limited network bandwidth to bring information back, and ability to bring limited data back. What's driving more towards AMI 2 is just that bringing that stuff, that equipment up to date, that's become a foundation. When you look at a lot of utilities grid modernization strategies, a lot of it revolves around leveraging AMI data to enhance operation of other grid management systems, ADMS, OMS, DERMS, different types of systems that manage the grid. AMI data is feeding that and making it better. The other area is increasing efficiency. Operational efficiency is always a pressure of utilities. AMI 2.0 technology helps to bring more automation to that process, whether it's billing, whether it's other types of day-to-day operations, kind of taking away from that manual processing that was done before, and also providing data to the utility so you can make better decisions faster and improving efficiency. There's always been an evolution in technology as we talk, AMI 1 to 2. It never ends, and there's not a start and finish. It's always just a progression of capabilities. As utilities evolve and their operating models evolve, the technology has evolved to support that as well. And we are starting to hear some talk of, this world of what is AMI 3 maybe down the road in the future. AI starts to come into the conversation relating to that and automating the grid and grid management using AI. So, AI is everywhere, but at the same time, it's where it's used and how it can benefit the utilities is still being explored. Customer expectations are also changing. Very limited information that utilities had on their bill, that utilities gave their customers. The customers are expecting more now. They're in a world of looking at their cell phone and getting instant information, and their expectations around energy information, information on their bill, information on programs is always evolving. And AMI 2 gives you a channel to help support those, meeting those evolving expectations. You look at utility models evolving. Here in Ontario, we're seeing a pressure to move towards a distribution system operator, DSO model, acting sort of like a mini ISO. And with that comes maybe the ability to control and manage renewables or demand side management, like controlling EVs or controlling generation. It starts to become a model where the AMI 2 technology is a great fit to help support those capabilities down the road. And again, just coming back to this analogy of AMI 1 to 2, when you look back at the meter itself, there's been a lot of advancements, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, that have been placed in the endpoint or the meter on the home. That's at the grid edge. It's kind of a misnomer to maybe call it a meter now. It's more of a sensor. It's sensing more. It's not just providing billing information, it's sensing voltage, current, different parameters that are kind of present at the very end of the grid before it transitions to the customer. The original meters back, again, early generation AMI were pretty basic. Couple channels of data, supported time of use rates, provided some basic outage information, some basic alerts, but very limited in what they could do. Good for the time, but now 15 years later, we have AMI 2 meters more processing power, more memory, more capabilities that have evolved from utility needs over that time as well. And they support a host of applications and capabilities that are more fitting to today's world. Again, some of the big things are more data, more channels of data, more granular data that helps to provide better decision making on the utility side and better transparency of energy use for customers. We're also seeing that evolution towards a very flexible platform that you can have apps or edge computing maybe on certain meters and not on others, or maybe on the entire fleet. So you can kind of customize over time the capabilities of some of the AMI 2.0 meters and their capabilities. It varies a bit vendor to vendor, and they kind of are achieving the same thing sometimes in different ways, but this is in general what AMI 1 to 2 is evolving. The thing that we speak to customers about quite a bit is you're not trying to solve today's problems with AMI2 if you're looking at replacing it. You have to also have a vision ahead as to what are the challenges 5 years out, 10 years out that you think you might be up against, and making sure that platform is flexible enough to meet those needs. Because you're going to have the same asset for probably 15 years in the field. So, and that's a difficult thing to replace. You can always update software, update apps on the meter, but going out and changing those end devices, you want to make sure you have that, again, that flexibility to support future needs and anticipated needs down the road. When we get to AMI2, it's not just a meter, it's a network, it's a canopy of capabilities that cover your service territory. And there are benefits that come with that, some on the operational side. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive list. It's just some of the things that are more prominent these days. Using those AMI meters and that solution, to help with voltage monitoring, sensing of the grid, not just at the endpoints on homes, but throughout the grid in different locations and bringing different information back. Optimizing the grid based on volt-var information coming from the meters. Monitoring and managing assets like transformers, being able to do some distribution automation, leveraging the network to put communication devices on grid devices so that they can be talked to through the AMI network itself. And then there's some capabilities in the center, DER support, so being able to support distributed energy resources. Load disaggregation is a hot topic, being able to determine appliances and their cost, breakdown behind the meter, outage detection and restoration, being able to make that better and improve it. On the customer side, you see that customers are their expectations growing around the information they receive related to their electricity consumption. They'd like to know when, hey, maybe appliances are using more electricity than expected, or getting high bill alerts when the bill, prior to getting the bill, they get an alert that says, looks like your bill is going to be higher this month. EV charging and giving visibility to what the EVs are using. Being able to participate in programs maybe where they can throttle their EVs and get an incentive to do that, which helps the grid and helps the customer. But in general, customer experience has become an important topic in utilities as they try to build that rapport with their customers and enhance their capabilities and their understanding of energy use. And you'll see the applications in the center. There's some applications that can benefit both the customer and the operation side of the business as well. So there's a straddling of some of these benefits. It's not just purely utility benefits. It's not just purely customer. There's kind of a spectrum of benefits that is available. Beyond the utilities, though, we're starting to see the vendors offer capabilities that go beyond maybe utility-specific benefits. We're starting to call them smart city benefits, things like smart street lighting, traffic control and management, being able to determine the traffic flows on different streets and avenues, smart parking capabilities, pollution monitoring, noise monitoring, being able to tie in to smart building controls, sending signals to buildings so they can react during peak times or busy times. This is an evolutionary part, but it's available today. So the idea of AMI2, the meter to cash stuff doesn't get mentioned a lot because it's sort of table stakes. You have to have that capability to be able to bring billing and operational and metering data back to the utility so they can provide bills to consumers. But it's all the other benefits that have opened up around AMI 2.0. And we're going to have a bit of an interactive poll. The first question we're going to ask, just to get some feedback, is where is your utility on your AMI 2 journey? Are you in the early stages of planning? Are you beginning a transition? Have you already deployed? Haven't you started yet? And we'll just give you half a minute or so to kind of respond to that, just so the group can see kind of in general where the industry is at and where the utility sector is at on kind of this pathway to AMI 2.0. So it looks by far planning and exploring is the biggest part of the group. A few beginning to transition, a fair amount, probably a third, actively deploying, and 20% that haven't really started yet. So we have a varying across the group, which is kind of what we expected, in that not everybody's fully on the path. Some are getting started. And I think when we get to Brian's discussion, it's going to help you to see the path that he took through this, because he's going to take you from the very beginning stages right through to an active deployment stage. So just relating to some of the trends that are happening that we see talking to customers, usually when you're in the early stages of a deployment or as it's being deployed or in the early stages of mass deployment, the priority is always meter to cash. They have to satisfy getting the bills out the door and collecting the funds from consumers. But it's not just that is a priority, but it's got to be accurate and it's got to be timely. If there's delays or, if there's problems getting bills out the door or reading the meters, that can lead to, a lot of disruption and could cause some major concerns for the whole AMI program. So managing meter to cash and making sure that it's a priority is probably at the top of the list. Utilities are also trying to bring in from earlier technology, disconnect, reconnect, so they don't have to roll trucks during, to disconnect or reconnect a customer to do service limiting, making sure that outage information is more accurate as they move to AMI 2, adopting new rate structures. We have some clients who've adopted AMI because they want to bring in future rates for, let's say, EV charging or other types of time of use rates. The main driver when you get to this point is making sure you have a platform that's flexible. So as time goes on, you can add what you need as the market demands it. After those day one priorities, customer engagement is kind of usually near the top of the list. Trying to just show the customer benefits so customers are on board with an AMI 2 deployment. Also, the regulators are kind of pushing a lot of utilities to show consumer benefits as well as utility benefits. They always ask what's in it for the customer. And this could include enhancements for outage notification, being able to proactively, during outages, send messages out to customers or show mapping where outages are taking place. Providing energy information portals where customers can see their billing information, understand their energy usage, and the impact of using different appliances at different times of day, high bill alerts. And kind of this gaining momentum is this idea of disaggregation, being able to see what appliances are contributing to their bills as well, and that engagement piece. Operational benefits are also right there at the beginning. And even during a lot of the AMI procurement and design phases, the ops team is very interested in what AMI 2 is going to bring to that side of the table for grid management. A lot of times, again, priorities are improved outage management notification. Hey, is distribution automation, can that bring some benefits to the utility? Things like EV detection and disaggregation, so utility planning teams can understand who's deploying heat pumps or who's deploying EV chargers. pool pumps, different types of things that could affect future loading and forecasting. Um, Enhanced data and analytics is kind of a cornerstone of this. When you bring more data back that provides visibility to the grid, getting that to the operations team so that they can benefit from it. And just overall grid modernization plans are kind of hinged a lot of times upon this AMI platform providing data to those grid modernization platforms as well. And around emerging trends, what we're seeing are utilities starting to take advantage of grid edge apps or grid edge capabilities. Um, there's certain things you can do in groups of meters and at the edge in near real time that are benefiting utilities and that maybe can't be done as well with big data back in the office. So utilities are really testing out these applications, starting to deploy them. We see this some pressure, especially in certain markets around AMI leads to a CIS. Usually you don't like to have multiple projects going on, but many times now we're seeing a CIS upgrade and an AMI upgrade happening at the same time because their benefits are tied together. We're also starting to see ADMS and DERM solutions where AMI is providing data to them, kind of happening right after AMI opportunities are kind of, people start moving on an AMI project, all of a sudden, hey, we're going to upgrade our ADMS, our grid management systems as well. And starting to move towards this real-time capability as well and bringing data back near real time so that decisions could be made quicker and more efficiently. There's some questions if you're kind of on that pathway to moving towards AMI2. Again, what are the business benefits? Have you mapped this out and do you have a strategy for quantifying what benefits you want to get out of AMI 2.0? And are they part of a business case that you can, defend and bring a business benefit and monetize it as well? You have to think through not just matching what your capabilities are today with AMI2, but anticipating future capabilities and making sure that the system you choose is able to support those capabilities, whether it's anticipated 5 years out or further out. You just want to make sure that the solution you're looking at is going to be able to support that. And you also have to decide what do you need on day one and what can you support maybe over time in a progressive approach over some deployment period. This is a big question we get from just about most of our customers when they're looking at AMI2, if they have a current AMI system. Do we upgrade the current system we have to the latest generation of that supplier's AMI2 capabilities, or do we replace it with a different or new system? And that's really utility specific. It varies amongst each customer. Some of it depends on, are you happy with your current solution? Does the replacement system have features that your current system is not supporting? Like there's a lot that goes into that, but that's probably one of the toughest decisions we see utilities trying to make is upgrade or replace, and it has implications as well. You have to think about this deployment schedule. How long are you going to deploy these meters over 5 years? Do you want to do it in a shorter time frame to reduce costs? Longer time frames because you have a stranded asset issue. This is unique to each utility. We see deployment periods anywhere from a couple years for mass deployment to sometimes we're hearing discussions about 8 to 10 years now too as well. But it's very utility specific. The rollout strategy is part of that deployment schedule. Are you doing it by billing cycle, by geographic areas, commercial first, residential? There's a lot of thought that has to go into this as to how you phase this. Especially, we'll go to the next point. Especially if you're going from an old AMI network to a new one under that replace strategy, you have to be conscious that you don't break the old network as you're building the new one and that all the meters can communicate so you can ensure the last point, which is billing integrity. So there's a lot of thought that goes into an AMI 1 to 2 transition. We help clients with this every day. It can be challenging. It's sort of unique utility to utility, but these are some of the key things that need to be thought about as you go down the path towards a transition. We have another poll question. What's the biggest challenge that you're facing when you think about AMI 2.0? And the poll should be finishing up soon. Managing costs and timelines is the big one. And just a comment on that is that most utilities we talk to, their impression of how long it would take to pull a business case together, develop a strategy, and do a procurement. This is a complex procurement and a complex project. It takes time. So you really have to think through the timelines that they're realistic and that they're achievable to meet your goals, because it's a large investment, whether you're a large utility or a small utility. The cost is proportionate for the meters because it depends on how many customers you have. And it is a large investment that's going to be in place for 15 years. So you want to make sure that the effort that goes into the strategy, the business case and procurement is solid so that it supports that decision, because you're going to have to live with it for a long time. Thanks. Going to hand it over to Brian, and he's going to take you through his journey and Festival Hydro's journey as they kind of progress from AMI 1 to 2 and some of the challenges they faced and some of the lessons learned. Brian, off to you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, John. I'm Brian Hartung. I'm the VP of Engineering and Operations at Festival Hydro. I've been here for almost 4.5 years now. And metering is one of the areas under my responsibilities, and helping to facilitate our AMI 2.0 program that we're working on. So today I'll just be sharing a little bit about what led us down the path, what we've learned along the way, and also what we've accomplished so far. Just a little bit about Festival Hydro. We have about 23,000 customers. We're headquartered in Stratford, Ontario. It's about 2 hours west of Toronto. We're what you'd call a mid-sized LDC in Ontario, and we have 7 distinct service communities within our area. So in between us is all Hydro One customers. So each of our communities that we service are distinct pockets. They don't touch each other or anything like that. If you want to go to the next slide. So why did we decide now was the time for our AMI 2.0? John hit on a lot of the main points that I'll touch on, but I'll just kind of hit the top 4 for us. So the first was just the aging condition of our existing infrastructure. So about 2010 was when our AMI 1 system went in. And just as it's approaching the end of its life, we're seeing challenges and complexities on the operations side that are leading to increased costs. We're seeing a higher failure rate in our meters, higher than we can keep up with for changing them. We do RMA meters, but we're just seeing more and more of those not even be able to be repaired either, where they're just completely scrapped, whether it's displays or the communications failing on them. But the kind of ripple effect that's had is that the amount of meters we've had to manually read so that we can keep filling our customers just keeps increasing. We're up over 10% of our meters that we had to manually read every month, and that's just led to really high costs on the operations side, on the admin side that weren't sustainable for us. Another issue is just meter availability. So because the parts in these meters, some of them are 15, 16 years old, it's getting harder and harder to source some of those parts. And in 2022, we were notified by our meter vendor that some of the parts were obsolete. They couldn't source them anymore, and that they weren't going to be available to us to purchase. And just with our AMI system we had, there weren't really any viable alternatives for the existing AMI system that we had. So we knew we were going to need to look at kind of a holistic approach of, do we look at replacing everything right away? Do we still do it piecemeal? But we knew because the meter availability was impacted that we needed to kind of look at our AMI system as a whole. The other thing that led to it was we were going into a cost of service, so we knew that to do an AMI program, we weren't going to be able to fit it within our existing capital program. It was going to have to be its own, just because of, as John said, the costs for it are pretty significant compared to what a normal capital program for a utility looks like. So we kind of backed out when we knew the cost of service application was going to be, and started our timeline based on that, so that we could be ready with pricing, with timelines going into that to the OEB to get it approved. And the other nice thing was some other utilities had already gone to the OEB with some business cases, some of their issues and troubles they'd had with their AMI system, and why the time was now for them for AMI 2.0 as well. So we weren't the first ones going in trying to build that business case. They'd heard a little bit of it before, and we could just kind of build on some of that evidence and some of that reasoning that they'd already used. And then finally, one of the benefits that it did bring is just there's been a lot of advancements in technology. For us, some of the things we were looking for were just the extra data that these meters bring back. There's a lot more information we can bring, not just for the metering department themselves, but to integrate with some of our other systems, our outage management, our CIS, things like that, as well as there's just a lot more information that we plan to be able to share with customers too, just so they can make more informed decisions with how they're using power, when they're using power, things like that. So just quickly about our RFP process. We started it in early 2023. We created an internal team within our company from the different business areas, so customer service, billing, IT, metering, engineering. We wanted to pull somebody from each area that this project was going to impact, just so we made sure we didn't miss anything as we were building out our requirements. And then we partnered with Utilysys to help us build the actual RFP. So we know our business and our company, but we knew that there was some knowledge gaps in the overall AMI landscape, kind of what vendors could bring, what they could offer, and we knew Utilysys had done quite a few of these, so we decided to kind of leverage their expertise to complement ours. So we started developing the RFP with them. We had quite a few technical workshops, just how our existing system was set up, some of the issues we were having, some of the things we wanted to solve, and just kind of building out what our business requirements were for that. The RFP itself was, I think, around 700 questions. It's a really detailed document, but each of those questions, in my opinion, is pretty necessary to make sure that you don't miss something in your vendor selection or anything like that you're going to get the solution you're expecting out of it. Once we signed off on the RFP, we again used Utilysys to help us release it and manage that process. So they sent it out to all the different vendors that we were going to entertain solutions from. Any questions, any addendums that we had to do with the vendors, we use Utilysys kind of as our intermediary. They again provided some expertise and guidance to us on kind of the reasonability of some of the requests, how to answer them best, how to get them that data that they were looking for, things like that. And then in total, the RFP process took about 4 months. That seems like a long time, but when you think about it, they really are designing an entire AMI system for us. They have to answer all those questions. So it is a really time-consuming process for each vendor when they do it as well. So we did get 4 complete submissions back afterwards as well, which we were really happy about. And then we entered our evaluation process. So basically what we did was we had members from all of our internal project team looked at every single solution that came through, and we evaluated the answers of each of those 700 questions. So we had assigned weightings to them based on what was most important to us in the vendor responses. So just to make sure that we were kind of getting the solution we knew we needed and what was going to suit our needs the most. When we went through the scoring, it's a pretty intense process on our side too. So we gave ourselves a week per vendor submission to do that scoring. It was probably 12 to 16 hours worth of work for each submission for us to go through, make sure we gave it the time it deserved to give it the scores. While we did that, Utilysys looked at all the costs that came in from the different vendors, both capital and operating, just so that when we we looked at the solution. We could look at not just how it met our technical requirements, but also the cost that it was going to be to accompany us to be able to implement that kind of solution. Once we did that, we were able to shortlist it. We took our top 2 vendors and we invited them for in-person vendor presentations. So that was just one day for the vendors to come in, really pitch the solution, answer any questions we might have, as well as they asked us some clarifying questions, things like that. But it's really just to get a comfort level of the solution that they were offering, how comfortable we were with them being able to kind of deliver on what they put together in their submission. Once we did that, there was just a couple takeaways for each vendor, and then they submitted their final answers, final pricings, things like that. And then we were able to rank and choose our preferred vendor. And who we ended up going with was Landis+Gyr. There's quite a few reasons why we ended up selecting them. They were able to meet all of our technical requirements while still being competitively priced compared to the other submissions that we got in. They did bring in a really strong in-person presentation and project team. So most of the questions that we asked the day that they were in, they were able to answer without needing to check with anybody or having to take it back or saying, well, we're not sure, it's actually not available yet, things like that. So it just gave us confidence that they'd be able to kind of deliver on what they proposed. They also had just released this new Revelo meter. So to John's point, we wanted to make sure we were partnering with somebody that could give us what we needed today with fixing some of the operational issues we were seeing, but also was going to give us flexibility in the future to kind of meet the evolving needs over the next 10, 15, 20 years without having to look at replacing meters again. We decided to get it hosted by Landis+Gyr. So our initial AMI system, everything was in-house, but we found that came with its own challenges, just the size of company we are, the size of our IT department. One person can have a lot of knowledge in their head, and if they leave, it leaves a pretty big gap internally. So we just felt more comfortable hosting it with them, letting them manage the software, the hardware, the updates, things like that. They also were able to give us a solution that was 100% communication coverage, so there didn't look to be any gaps in meters not being able to communicate or be read or having to look at cellular options, which was something we really wanted with the solution. And then finally, we didn't have a requirement to have other Ontario customers, but we wanted to make sure there was other Canadian customers. Measurement Canada is a little bit different compared to some other governing bodies in other countries and things like that. So we just wanted to make sure that there's other large customers they had in the country so that they were invested in here. They were going to keep updating their firmware, things like that, to stay current with MC requirements. And it wasn't just going to be our 23,000 customer utility that was kind of their foothold in the whole country. Just quickly, the 3 deployment phases that we've gone through. So initially was our vendor selection. So this was about 18 months total. So again, that was creating and issuing our RFP, selecting our vendor, getting board approval, and then going through the whole contract negotiations and signing. We internally thought we could do this a lot quicker, but we did realize that to make sure that we did it right, you just have to put in the time that it needs. Even the contract negotiations were 6 to 9 months because there's just enough back and forth and a lot of details in there that you want to make sure that you're covered for any scenario. After that, we moved into the planning and pilot. So we made our own project team. Landis+Gyr made theirs. We set up quite a few workshops, planning, training, some infield surveys on where equipment was going to go, things like that. But that was really just a lot of the understanding of how the systems were going to work together, how we were going to set it up, how we were going to be able to keep our existing AMI infrastructure while installing this new one and have them both be functional and operational without one breaking the other. We were able to install our head-end system, do all of our testing, and then we did a pilot installation in one of our communities. So we picked one of our smaller ones. It's about 600 customers, but that was where we installed all of our first meters. And that was really just to make sure all of the testing, all of the verifications that we had done were accurate and we're going to work in a real life scenario. So we did that and left it for a couple months just to make sure that we hadn't missed anything, that customers were getting billed properly, that the data was flowing where it needed to. And now we're in our mass deployment phase. So we're planning to make this a 5-year process. We're in year 2 right now. So last year we were able to install another 4,000 meters, and then this year we're actually right in the middle of our deployment for this year. So we're kind of doing it in 2-week chunks where we'll blitz a couple communities. We're there, we pull out all the meters, we put all the new meters in before the next billing cycle, and that's kind of our plan over the next number of years. We are taking our AMI 1 meters out of those areas and repurposing them where possible. So if we have meters that aren't communicating properly, things like that we're face reading, we'll send a meter tech there. We'll pull out the one that's not working properly. We'll put the new one in. And again, that's just to try to keep operational costs down, so we're not visiting it every single month. And then we have used a mix of internal and external resources. So we don't have, again, we have 45 employees. We don't have a lot of extra resources available to us. So we've used some of our own metering employees. We've used some operations employees, but then we've also got some outside help as well to help us. About 10 to 12 people working through the mass deployment. About 4 of them are internal staff, and then the rest would all be external. And then the next slide. So finally, just some lessons that we've learned. Don't underestimate the timelines. If you discover that you need to start installing new meters, you got to give yourself a couple years of building that business case, finding the right vendor, getting the meters built, things like that, before you're actually installing the first one. So that's kind of what we learned, is you got to give yourself a couple years worth of time to be able to make sure that you're doing the due diligence that you owe yourself for the project. And then just understanding the resource needs and requirements. Both in the RFP phase, it's a lot of work for the employees that you're using to evaluate the different vendors and different solutions. So you just have to remember that they have a day job as well, and that you have to allocate their time accordingly so that they still can give it the time it deserves when the AMI submissions, RFP needs to be built, things like that. Have a plan going into the RFP of what you want. So there's a lot of back and forth between us and Utilysys when we were creating the RFP, and if we weren't kind of internally aligned already with what we wanted out of the project, it would have made that phase a lot longer, because we would have had to take a lot of things back and then come back to Utilysys afterwards. So being internally aligned on what you want out of this project really can save you a lot of time. And then a suggestion that we got was having a vendor pre-meeting before you send out the RFP, because it is so much work for them. They want to be sure that you're serious about this project, that they're not sinking 4 months worth of time and effort into something that's not going to proceed. So one thing that we found out shortly after we'd sent out the RFP was a lot of them wanted to get an understanding of where we were in the process. Did we have approval for it? You know, why we were doing it, things like that. And we just probably could have saved some time and headaches if we had just had that meeting before the RFP went out, so that they were kind of ready to jump as soon as they saw it. Have good data and evidence for your cost of service. So when you create your cost of service, there's something called materiality sheets, where you're basically providing your evidence for why this program needs to happen. For most programs like pole replacements, things like that, it's 7 or 8 pages. For this, it was over 24 pages for us, because we really wanted to prove to the OEB, because of how expensive it is, how intensive it is on the capital side, that this was something we really needed to do. So you just want to make sure that you've got all that data to back you up, because you are going to get questioned on it. And then plan that transition from your existing to your new AMI network. The worst thing you could probably do is get your new meters in and then realize that you've done something to break your existing network, your existing communications, because it's not a process that you can do overnight to change the old ones out and put the new ones in. You've got to stage it properly, and you've got to put the time into making sure that that's a well thought out process. And then finally, just one thing we learned through the mass deployment is you want to proactively engage with your customers as much as you can. We found that we tried to communicate as many different ways. We put things on social media. We called all of our customers that were going to be impacted when we were doing our different communities. We put things on bills. But when you come to change their meter, customers don't see everything, don't get those phone calls, things like that. So we even found that giving our contractors, giving our employees something that they could hand to the customers just to frequently ask questions, things like that was really helpful in just deferring a lot of calls into the office, as well as a lot of concerns that they had just about what the program was, what these meters were doing, things like that. And that's all for me, John. I'll pass it back to you or David.
John, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this time?
Sorry, David. Yeah, thanks again to Electricity Canada for hosting this. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or to continue the conversation. You have our contact information that will be circulated. Are there any questions that we can try to answer for you?
Well, thanks, John. And we do have some that have come in. And just a reminder to our participants that you can go to the Q&A section on the website and or on the Zoom, and we'll get to it. We will get to each of them, and maybe just to kickstart it off, John, I think there's a question for you. Do most utilities do a business case prior to procurement?
Not all of them. Many of them do. We recommend it. The business case just helps you to set goals and objectives for your AMI program up front, so that is kind of a guiding light as you go through the procurement phases and the implementation phases to make sure you're achieving those. It also helps you to build a plan and a budget for this. And the one thing we recommend is a lot of those more advanced benefits, if they're not brought in to the business case early, a lot of times when the AMI project is kind of wrapping up on the meter to cash, it's kind of tough to get additional funding to go for the extra kind of capabilities, analytics, those types of day two benefits. So if you build that into your original business case, then the money is set aside to do all of the types of advanced pieces you want to do down the road as well. So not everybody does a business case. Some just treat it as a equipment upgrade and go out and change meters and upgrade to AMI2, but we recommend a business case as kind of a wise investment at the early stages.
Thanks. And I guess just to follow on, I know Brian touched on it a little bit, but from your perspective at Utilitysys, John, what is a typical time frame that you're seeing for an AMI procurement?
Yeah, just the procurement part, I think Brian had like 18 months for some of the pre-work. It takes longer than you think. Like even just to release it to the market, usually the vendors want to have an RFP for say 6 to 8 weeks at least to kind of put a solution together and come back to you with a quality response. So when you add in the time to develop the specs and make sure it's specific to that utility, 12 months is not unusual. Sometimes we can shorten it a bit, but in general, 12 or more months just for the procurement. Business case takes a bit of time as well. If that's kind of tacked onto that, you're starting to get to 18 months pretty quick.
Right. Thanks. It helps give people just kind of a high-level guideline. And Brian, maybe from your perspective, how are you planning to leverage the AMI 2.0 platform in the next, say, 5-10 years to take advantage of the additional functionality this technology will be bringing to Festival?
Yeah, so there are a lot of new features that these meters bring that we are kind of looking into right now for what we can do. So a couple of the ones I'll touch on are there are remote disconnects, reconnects that we didn't have functionality for in our AMI1. So we're going to be looking to leverage that in the future so that when we have to disconnect customers for non-payment, things like that. Currently, we have to roll the truck. We have to take somebody out there. We have to pull the meter, sleeve the meter, things like that. And so that costs us windshield time, things like that, where if we can do it from the office, that's going to save us a lot of time and money. And then also there's these, the grid edge computing, I think is going to be, it's a really new area, but it's an area that I think us and a lot of other utilities and customers really should be excited about. So there just looks to be a lot of new information that we can bring back to our system that will help us plan, forecast, just that we can integrate with all of our analysis and forecasting that we're doing already, just to make more intelligent decisions, really more granular decisions about what's happening in our distribution system, and also look to provide that to our customers so that they understand what their loads are consuming, how they're using their power, and maybe ways they can shift it or possibly save money, become more efficient, things like that.
Sounds good. And Brian, when you're evaluating the different AMI 2.0 solutions, when you were doing that, what was the most important factor, and would that still be the same with the knowledge that you have now?
Yeah, so our most important factor was, as I mentioned, we had a pretty high failure rate of meters, and we were manually reading a lot. So one of our more important things was making sure that the solution we were going to get was going to fix that problem for us immediately. So we were looking for ones that gave us complete coverage of our network territory so that we could make sure that those costs were going to go away pretty quickly. And then also at the same time, making sure we were picking a meter though that was going to give us the flexibility over the life of it to still kind of meet the evolving needs of both utilities and our customers. So that was really our focus, I'll say, going into it. And I still think that that's probably the right focus today, just from what we've seen. Thankfully, we've seen the benefits of those new meters. Our read rates are extremely high. We basically have wiped out that problem in the communities that we've installed these meters, which has been great to see. And we have seen some of the benefits of what this extra data, what this extra capabilities those meters can bring back are going to bring us already and in the future. So I do think that was the right thing to focus on.
Brian, thank you. Just moving over to some additional questions. We've got a number, and we'll maybe get into rapid fire here. A reminder, you can go into the Q&A section of Zoom, and we'll get to it. So maybe John, I'll turn over to you. Can AMI2 be deployed on existing meters, or is it loaded into new meters? Which companies are making these meters?
Yeah, the AMI2 is very dependent on the endpoint and the computing power and memory in that endpoint. So not all meters have that capability that you could put that functionality on those meters. So in general, I would say you have to replace those older meters. Some of the meters that maybe have been deployed in the last few years maybe have some capability to be upgraded to some degree on that. But the oldest meters that were, that have been in service for 10 to 15 years, no, they're going to have to be replaced with a new endpoint that has that capability. With regards to which companies, that's always changing. We see a lot of new entrants into the AMI2 market as well. So I would say that's best one that's left for a web search or whatever, because it's difficult to kind of cut that list down. There are usually like 6 to 8 traditional players who you see in a lot of RFPs, but we do see some new entrants as well. But without endorsing individual companies, I would leave that as, if you want to reach out, we can maybe talk about that. But in general, that's kind of it's always changing, that market, as to who's playing in that space.
Great, thanks. I'm not sure which one of you might be best for this. How does the OEB, the Ontario Energy Board, allow for the CapEx or operational expenses associated with AMI 2.0?
I can answer that one.
Thanks,
sure. So kind of how I touched on our cost of service application. So when you're submitting that to the OEB, you're basically giving them how much money as a utility you believe you need to complete the programs that the LDC needs to do. So just as part of that, you build in your AMI 2.0 business case. So you put in how much it's going to cost, how you're going to pace it out, how much money you need each year to be able to do that. And then as part of your cost of service decision with the OEB, they basically tell you how much money they're going to give you, and you decide if that's enough for you to still do your AMI 2.0. So with ours, we were able to, I feel, build a really strong business case so that we could make sure that we were able to get the funding we needed from them so that we could continue with this project. So it's really, you build the business case, you go to the OEB as part of your cost of service to say this is how much money we need to do this, and then as part of your settlement with them for what your final amounts are for your capital and your operating budgets, you fit your AMI 2.0 program in there, and it's built into your rates with your customers.
Thank you. There was a question related to, will recording of the proceedings be sent? The answer is yes. It will be available on Electricity Canada's website, electricity.ca. Also, as a registrant, you will be receiving via email copies of the presentation and recording. Next question was, probably Brian, did you have town halls during customer reach out? If not, was it considered?
So we didn't do specific town halls during our customer outreach. So when we were going through our cost of service, we did quite a few customer engagement surveys, and AMI 2.0 was a big part of those customer surveys, where we kind of put in the impact it would likely have on bills to do this program, and to understand kind of customer sentiment on it. And what we found was that it was a very positive reception from our customers. So we didn't really feel like we were going to have a large issue with the rollout. And while each customer has to experience an outage as part of it, it's a 2 to 3 minute outage to pull a meter and put a new one on. So I think if it was going to be more impactful, or if it was our AMI 1 where it's brand new smart meters and not something that customers had gone through before, we may have done something different. But we found with all the communication methods we'd used to date, we really hadn't gotten a lot of customer feedback, so we didn't find that it was something that we needed to do.
All right, thank you. And I guess Brian, still, did you find that the per meter cost of AMI 2 is within the inflation adjustment from AMI 1, or is it significantly higher or lower?
I don't know how detailed I want to get, I guess, on an answer for that, but we found the cost very reasonable for the AMI 2.0 meters, for sure. I mean, one thing I think to also keep in mind is there's a lot more capabilities that those meters have. There's a lot more technology in them. There's grid edge cards, so it's not the exact same as a 1.0 meter that you have to. It's not really comparing apples to apples either at the same time. So we found the cost reasonable, and we were comparing different vendors with AMI 2.0 solutions. So we kind of knew what we were looking at cost wise, and yeah, it was very reasonable and within what we were expecting, for sure.
Thanks. How do companies looking to leverage AMI 2.0 capabilities access or speak to the meter to leverage capabilities that can be used to help utilities manage various assets?
I could try to speak to that, Brian, if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Within a utility, within a utility, they share that information via integrations and databases that they can share and push that information to other systems. But I think this question comes from the perspective of outside companies looking to get access to that data. And I would say in most cases that, it's difficult it's usually protected data within the utility realm. So there's not really an opportunity for third parties to get access to that. We're starting to see some utilities like St. John Energy and some others. I seen a recent announcement that they're trying to release some generic data so that people can use it to kind of help the utility sector, I guess. But in general, that's proprietary data and confidential data that stays within the utility realm.
Thank you. I note that we're just about at time. We do have 4 more questions, so I would ask that those that need to leave, because we're at the 2 o'clock time frame, please leave, but we'll stay and answer the remaining 4 questions if that's okay. So the next one is, which technology, Brian, did you select in terms of communication?
Sure. So communication wise, so it uses like the 900 megahertz spectrum. It's the unlicensed spectrum that it uses, and then it goes through kind of a mesh network to get back to what they call collectors, and then we use the cellular backhaul to get it all back to the head-end system.
Great, thanks. Was your AMI 2.0 an upgrade from your existing vendor or a new vendor replacement?
Yeah, we ended up selecting a new vendor for our AMI 2.0.
Thank you. Doesn't the OEB want LDCs to use Canadian domestic suppliers remeters?
So there has been some recent provincial government, not policy, but preference, I guess I'll say, for buying domestic where possible. I'll say that when we went out to look at the different vendors and where things were manufactured, that's not always a possibility for where things are getting built these days. So it's definitely a consideration, but you also need to make sure that you're doing what's best for your company and your customers at the same time.
Great, thank you. What grid edge functionality is being adopted by customers? What are the AI capabilities being written into requirements in recent programs?
Brian, do you
Do
want
you
me
want to talk
to?
to that, John?
Yeah, sure. So different suppliers have different kind of grid edge apps that they're making available. Things like locational awareness, where does that device sit in the grid? Things around safety like hot socket detection or, high impedance connections. So there's a lot of functionality that utilities are trying out. Some are starting to roll it out. It's still relatively early days in some of that stuff. With regards to the AI is just starting to become part of the conversation. I don't think there's been a specification or requirements in any RFPs that kind of call out what is your AI capability, but we're starting to see that start to show up in some of the conversations, whether it's from vendors or from utilities. AI is a very hot topic when you go to the trade shows. Everything is AI enabled, but it's really what benefit is it bringing. So I think utilities are kind of exploring that, but it's still pretty early days as well.
Right. And so the question is, so ratepayers will pay for the AMI 2.0 as well as Utilisyst fees?
So I guess in a nutshell, I mean, anytime you're upgrading anything, whether it's poles, wires, any part of the distribution system, all of that is funded by our customers, whether that's for meter redeployment, which again, it was for us at least, it was at our end of life and needed to be replaced just so that we could continue to best serve our customers. But for any capital program that any utility does, that's correct, that the customers are the ones who end up funding it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and certainly, John, we know that Utilysys offers a whole breadth of services that utilities can take advantage of, and obviously, it costs of doing business, but it's a tremendous benefit to have access to resources when, as Brian was saying, there's the employees have their regular jobs, so it's great to be able to rely on experts as well.
It's really assisting. Yeah, it's really assisting them to help to get to a good outcome. That's kind of our efforts.
That's a great summary. We thank you for that. So thank you again, John and Brian, for this time. And all of our future events at Electricity Canada, the webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter, Current Affairs, or you can access the event section of our website at electricity.ca. So in closing, I would like to once again thank each of Utilysys and Festival Hydro for presenting, and each of you for joining us today. This concludes today's webinar, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.